I've just come back from a throat infection, so I wasn't able to narrate for the last week. Sorry about the slight delay. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Cop here. Anyone want a story? About 9 years ago, we got a call from a payphone. There's a dead body in an abandoned building at... An officer responds to the area and can't find anything that would be considered an abandoned building. The caller hung up without leaving any information, and the payphone that he had called from was several miles away from the area. The officer clears out the call, having no contact. The next day, we get another phone call from another payphone. There's a dead body inside the abandoned building at... And again, they hang up without offering any information. This time, I get dispatched to the report. I head up to the area of that intersection and start looking around. Now, understand that I live and work in a fairly sizable metropolitan area, and this was when the economy was still good, booming even. Abandoned buildings were really hard to come by at the time. I drive through all the shopping plaza and I find a little industrial complex within the vicinity of the intersection. I decided just to drive a little further. I remembered that there's some new construction that hasn't been finished yet, and I wonder if they think that these are considered abandoned. I get out of my car and walk through a bunch of businesses that are still in farming stages. I can't find anything. As I leave the area, I'm now more than a mile away from the call location. As I pull onto the major roadway, I stop for traffic and look in front of me. There it is, a gigantic electrical component factory that's been vacant for at least 15 years probably. It has a 9-foot wall around the entire perimeter and the landscaping is still maintained. That's why it didn't really stick out like a sore thumb. That added to the fact that I'm pretty far away from where the caller said it should be. But then again, it's abandoned. It's definitely abandoned and been so for a long time. So I call for another unit to back me up and we go check it out. We use a drainage pipe to climb up and over the 9-foot wall to get inside the perimeter. We started walking inside the building, checking every single door. When I say this building's big, I mean it's freaking gigantic. It's over 100,000 square feet. It's like an old abandoned Motorola or Freescale or Intel type building. It has gigantic coolers on the outside, pipes running all over the place, ductwork running all over the sides of the building, loading docks and a basement. Every door we come across is locked and secured. We continued walking around looking for anything that's out of place. I get about 3/4 of the way around the building, I pull on a door and it flings open. I call my backup who comes over to me, we knock, announcing into the building. As we step into the hallway that leads about 100 yards down with doors on either side, the door we stepped into closes. It's black, pitch black, like I can't even see my nose or my face. We started moving through the building, trying to clear each room the best two of us can, but this place is huge. Each room is connected to what seems like 4 other rooms. We step into one room and the door closes behind us. It must have been some old clean room or something like that. It was the weirdest thing because there was no sound. Nothing. I couldn't even hear the traffic outside or the grumble of electricity or air moving even. All the sounds that we heard throughout the rest of the building were gone into this one room. When I spoke to my partner, our voices didn't even echo. It must have been some kind of old sound cancelling installation or something. It freaked us out. The floor had 12-inch holes in it. This led into the basement, which was flooded by over 6 feet of water, wire, ceiling panels and wire jacketing, which was just hanging from the ceiling. There was broken glass, broken pieces of metal and brick, holes in the drywall, and abandoned equipment everywhere. I can clearly remember thinking to myself that if there was ever a time that we're going to be attacked by skinless zombie dogs, this would be it. The entire time that we're in here, we're trying to find a dead body. We ended up moving through the building, clearing it as best we could until we get to what was definitely in the industrial part of the building. Gigantic boilers, evaporative coolers, and components that run throughout the building. Oh, and spiders. Tons of them. We stepped into a room and find that it's dead-ended. We've reached the end of the building and we don't have any further to go. This room is about 20 feet by 30 and it contains very large electrical cabinets. They're about 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide. They're sitting next to each other and they look exactly how I would design the lab of an evil genius if I had to make one like out of a sci-fi film. The entire thing was covered in dials, levers, red and green buttons, but the only panel in the middle was illuminated. It had one steady glowing red light on it, the first and only light that we actually saw throughout the entire building. My partner calls out to me, "You got anything?" "Nah, nothing in here." Looks like this was a gigantic waste of time. Just let me take a look behind these cabinets and we'll go back to our cars. Now the panels have about 18 to 24 inches of room on each one and between them and on the wall behind them. So I look over the wall to the left side and peek my head round. Bam. There he is, a dead guy on the ground, pinned between the wall and the electrical cabinet. The way that he's pressed up means that his arms are in front of him and pushed out from his chest like he's a T-Rex. I nearly shot him, not gonna lie. He scared the life out of me. Even though I spent the last hour actively looking for him, I still wasn't completely ready for it. So skip ahead calling detectives, etc. At the time, dripping copper wire was fairly new, at least to our area. I didn't recognise what the wire jacketing meant. I hadn't seen it before. These two knuckleheads had broken into this abandoned factory for God knows how long and systematically begun stripping out the entire place of every bit of metal that it had. And they made their way to the very last room, the only one that still had power run into it. See, the middle panel, you controlled the fire suspension system for the building, and the owner's insurance policy required that it remained actively on. When these guys opened up the panels, they must have thought they hit the mother lode. Each one contained 1.5 inch copper cable. Now, 1.5 inch of copper cable is worth quite a lot of money, but it also conducts a hell of a lot of electricity. They cut through the first one successfully, leaving the sharp ends exposed inside the cabinet, but when this poor sab started cutting through the second one, he got the shock of his life. Not only did he electrocute himself, but the current coursing through his arms pulled his chest into the cabinet. Not only that, his chest would have went straight into the exposed wire, cutting him, killing him instantly. We went to an apartment which was a local drug den. A female we knew called and said that the male renter had been assaulted and she had run. We got there and the door was bolted shut. I kicked the door over and over again and it wouldn't budge. What I found out later is that the dope team had done a search warrant on the apartment a couple of weeks earlier, and thereafter they had reinforced the door with a metal plate. It took me a total of 22 kicks before the door finally broke. The deadbolt went flying in two across the room and hit the wall. We made entry, guns drawn, and started clearing the entire apartment. Now this place is the kind of spooky that I've only seen in places where meth is done. It was dark, there were swastikas, 666, upside down pentagrams, etc. all painted on the wall. Pictures of faces hung on the wall with the eyes X'd out, baby dolls with their eyes scratched out into X's. Now as we cleared the first room, we started seeing the blood, first on the bed, then a trail leading to the back room. The layout was weird. It was really odd. There was one main room, then a back room which was more of a hallway to a bathroom and the end of that hall. We followed the trail of blood from the hall into the bathroom. In front of the door was the renter's dog, which was shaking uncontrollably and very scared. As we got closer, it became aggressive. I made my way all the way round the dog and entered the bathroom, where I found the renter hunched over in the shower, bleeding from his face, holding his cheeks with his hands. He was frantically trying to talk, pleading with us not to hurt his dog. Blood was coming from his mouth and I couldn't understand him. Then I saw the extent of what had happened to him. His jaw had been dislocated on both sides as he was beaten by two men with a hammer. His jaw was literally just hanging there, and he was just trying to plead with us, but he could only do so by flicking his tongue about a bit and tried desperately to get words out. When I was 11, I moved to a rather big city due to my dad getting transferred at his work. Before that, I lived in a relatively small town known for its smelly garbage dump. I love that town, with all my heart, I really do. I still love it to this day, but this experience shattered my childhood illusion that it was safe and nothing bad could ever happen with anyone. I lived in a very close-knit neighbourhood where all the parents knew each other and all of the kids were friends. At the end of my street has a small, half-built house that's sort of become the neighbourhood hangout. It's been abandoned since its construction for unknown reasons. It sat there for nearly 2 years before all of us decided that it was a perfect clubhouse. All of the kids would walk home from school together, tell their parents that they were going to go hang out there and just go head down to the house. So on one Saturday, I walked across the street to my friend's house and asked if she wanted to go to the clubhouse with me. She said she was eating lunch, but she'd meet me there as soon as she was done with that. I was only 7 at the time, but my parents trusted me enough not to get into any trouble or run off somewhere, so I headed down there to wait. I was sitting on the front steps of the house when a white car with very dark tinted windows pulled up to the curb. To my young mind, it looked exactly like a police car, just without any lights on, so I thought they were undercover. The driver of the car rolled down the passenger side window and leaned over his seat. I could see he was wearing a policeman's uniform and aviator sunglasses. He waved me over, not wanting to make the cop angry. I decided just to approach the passenger side of the car. "Hey there, do you think you can help me with something?" he asked me. He seemed nice enough. I said, "Yeah, I'll try." He went on to show me a picture of a little girl that I've never seen before and asked me if I knew her. I shook my head. He then told me that she was missing and her parents really missed her and wanted her back, and he was having a lot of trouble finding her. Now at this point, my friend from earlier had showed up. The guy asked Anna, who is my friend, if she had seen the little girl, but she hadn't either. He then seemed to get really sad and shook his head. "I just really wish I could find her. Do you want to help me look? If you get in my car, we can drive around and see if we can all find her." To me that sounded awesome. I threw all notions of stranger danger out of the window. I'd never been in a cop car before and thought I'd have the time of my life, but Anna, she seemed to be a lot more cautious and have her head on right that day. She politely declined. This visibly upset him and he got really angry, telling us that he'd arrest us if we didn't get into the car and help. Anna and I both started freaking out and we then booked it to my home. The guy then reached into his glove box and pulled out a small set of handcuffs. He sped off as soon as we started running though. At this point we're both crying, but managed to get to my home and tell my mum everything that happened. She immediately called the police, who asked if they had an officer patrolling our area. They didn't. And then the real cops showed up to my house and asked me and Anna a ton of questions, and I realised that the scary guy's uniform was way off. They tried to get a description from us, but he was wearing a hat and sunglasses, so it made it hard to see a lot of his face. We, however, given a pretty good description of the little girl. As far as I know, nothing ever happened to that guy. The description we gave of the little girl didn't match any missing people claims within a 100-mile radius of our town. This is a story my friend told me that happened to her older sister. She goes to a large, private religious university in Utah. She was staying in an apartment not too far from the campus with 3 other girls. That semester, they had just started and 2 of the 3 girls were asleep. Now at the time, my friend's sister was on the phone, sitting in the living room when she heard what sounded like footsteps outside the window, literally right behind her. She listened really closely, but dismissed it as a stray cat or a dog. Soon after, she heard a thud against the dining room wall coming from the outside. After that, she heard what sounded like a muffled whispering. My friend's sister is an excellent marksman, so she decided to scare whoever it was outside by opening the blinds, turning on the lights and grabbing the shotgun that she kept on the mantelpiece and pointing it at the window while screaming for the other girl to get up. She then saw a short man, wearing all black and a ski mask, running away. The cops come shortly after and she filed a report. Now fast forward to a few weeks later. My friend's sister kept seeing a small white truck with tinted out windows following her. She dismissed it as her own imagination, but she started to get a little scared by this. One weekend, her roommates had gone out of town, so she was just by herself. Right as she's trying to fall asleep, she hears a pounding at the door again. She bolts to the door and looks through the peephole to see a cop standing there. "Who are you?" she called out to them. "I'm a cop," says the guy. Then, "Open up, it's the law," he says more menacingly. My friend is really scared now. She's worried to disobey him in case he actually is a cop, but what if he's not? "Why are you here so late?" she asks. "Remember a few weeks ago when the guy tried to break into your home? I have an update on him." My friend is now freaking out, because why would a cop come and try and talk to her about the case so late and by himself? He wasn't even the officer who helped her fill out the report. "Show me your badge," she demanded. He then quickly produced a badge and shoved it into the peephole. My friend sighed a breath of relief. Right as she is unlocking the door, she glanced down to his legs and noticed this cop had very elevated platform boots, a machete on his unity belt, and the name on his uniform didn't match the name on the badge. "You're not a cop," she yelled at him. The fake cop started screaming and slamming on the door, saying, "I am an officer of the law and you will obey me. Open up now." She then dialed 911 and held her weight behind the door, clutching her shotgun. The guy was gone long before the police could arrive, but he left behind his cap, which was a prop from a party store. To this day, my friend broke her lease, moved to a new city, and transferred to a new school. They never caught that guy. I went to a welfare check. A neighbour called in saying that he hadn't seen this guy for a few days and the lights have been on for a while now. I go and look around and find no footprints or tyre marks in the snow from the recent storm. I check the garage and find nothing. I check the house, which was unlocked, and found the guy's cell phone, keys, wallet and cash with his TV on. That's when I realised this was now a dead body search. I looked everywhere in and outside of the house and around the garage. Now there were some old vehicles out in the garage, but again, I looked but I couldn't find any tyre marks anywhere. There was no shoe prints either. I call recent numbers on his phone and nobody's heard from him. Only so much I can do now is issue a BOL and we started getting NCIC paperwork ready. The next day, the shift officer goes over to follow up. Turns out, the guy was ploughing his driveway and either had a medical condition or something and passed out or died on the spot and crashed a truck into the other junk cars, which eventually caught on fire. This left only a pile of bones in the front seat covered in snow. I felt terrible for not finding him that night, but it was really creepy knowing that I was literally just inches away from him like this. I am an intern with the Sheriff's Police Department, so most of my time is spent out on patrol. We got called out to do a wellness check, which the deputy thought was going to be a piece of cake, like maybe she went out of town or something. When we get there, we're met by the neighbours who told us that the mail is piling up. The box hasn't been touched for ages and there's untouched packages on the porch. Okay, so we get up to the house. The front door is unsecured. So we crack open the door a couple of inches and the deputy calls inside, but the door won't move anymore. The house was one of those that split where the stairs meet the front door and the upstairs and downstairs are offset, so we concluded there might be stuff behind the door. It's about this time that the deputy tells me that she is a known hoarder and that's why the door could have been stuck this way. He also mentions to me that if we see flies on the insides of the window, then she's probably deceased. As we walk round to the side of the house, we notice that there are flies on the windows. The back door was locked, and we looked in and we noticed bags upon bags of garbage, diapers and mist all over the place. We head to the back and then the front and attempt to make an entry. He pushes the door open, this time with more force. I manage to squeeze quite hard and we look down and from underneath, we see a grease-like liquid spreading out from under the floor. The deputy stops, closes the door and calmly tells me that The lady has passed away. It's more than likely that she's wedged behind the door. From the dates and the packages, we concluded that she's been gone for about 2 months. Once we did make entry to the house, I was allowed inside. It was very nasty to see her laying like that. Now the thing that really got into me is wondering though, if she had fallen down those stairs and died, unable to move and waiting for help that would never come. I was new on the force and sent to a home invasion in progression late at night. I noticed my training officer didn't seem too concerned and responded slowly as opposed to normally urgent. Now upon arrival, he asked me if I had been to a home invasion before. After I said no, he told me that I could go handle the call. As I walked towards the home, the garage opened up and an elderly lady was bent over at a 90-degree angle as her waist hobbled out. Without looking at me, she said to hurry due to the fact that the 2 black male suspects were in her home. I then noticed that she didn't have the ability to be able to stand up straight, and she was partly off. I then walked into the home with her behind me. While my eyes were adjusting to the interior, I heard a click. I turned to find the lady locking 2 pads on the interior door. I then noticed as we were in the kitchen that every cabinet and pantry also had a secure lock on it. I looked down the hallway and found that every interior door of the house was shut with padlocks. I followed the elderly woman down the hall and to the second door on the left. She began to unlock the padlocks and shouted, "They're in here!" To my surprise, within the room, there was an older white guy sitting at the table using a desktop computer. He looked at me, greeted me. He then identified himself as a woman's husband, and then that whatever he was doing, he went back to it. The woman then pointed at an empty chair and began to yell, "They're under the chair. Oh no, they just ran outside there, quick." She was now pointing to a wall. After then waiting for the woman to lock her husband back into the room, and then waiting for her to let me out of the room, I cursed my training officer and hightailed out of there. Now this was my first exposure to mental illness and it was creepy. My officer then told me that she had been attacked by 2 young males years back, which caused her to have a mental breakdown, and every so often she thinks she sees them again. This happened a couple of years ago when I was backpacking in Australia. I travelled around driving a van. Like many backpackers there do, it saved a lot of money with accommodation. I usually slept in rest areas, gas stations, or wherever I could park. This one night in particular, I'd been driving around for a few hours and started to feel sleepy. I decided then to stop in the next resting area, in the middle of nowhere. The parking in that location during daytime could be a great idea, but at night it seemed like a horror movie set. There were no cars parked anywhere. I know, I should have went to where people were, but I was really drowsy. There were no lights on whatsoever. I turned the engine off and closed the curtains of the van. It wasn't too long before dawn that I heard some heavy knocking on the side of the van. "Open up, it's the police." Nothing wakes you up faster than that. My heart was racing. I was just adjusting to the adrenaline rush in my system when they repeated the heavy knocking, saying again that it is the police. My first thought is that I parked somewhere that I shouldn't, but then again, it was in the middle of nowhere and it was a rest area. Before opening up, with my mind telling me that the situation was weird, I decided to go slowly to one of the windows and look through the gap in the curtains. I could clearly see the shape and shadow of the guy standing beside the van. His car wasn't too far off, but it didn't have any lights or flashing lights on. The guy was definitely not fed. Bringing up the courage I had, I shouted, "Go away, I have a gun and I'm calling the cops. They're on the radio to me now." I didn't have a radio or gun. Didn't seem to faze him though. I saw him go back to his car. To add to the creepiness, somebody jumped out of the bushes and rushed back into the same car. They left and a few minutes later after that, I turned on my van and drove in the opposite direction they went. Safe to say that I never slept in another rest area that didn't have at least a couple of other people there. I don't know what those people wanted, but with Australia's history of backpacking serial killers, I'm very happy to say that I got away. The creepiest thing I found was a guy who passed away, but not just your average guy. This guy died on his couch, surrounded by no less than 1,500 milliliter cans. Plus he had no friends or family at all, sadly. None. He was retired, and his electric bill was auto-deducting from his checking accounts. He died on his couch, and nobody realised it for 6 months. We then found him. The top was completely skeletonized, but the bottom, that half was still rotten. So he was half skeleton, half rotten. It is really creepy and sad though that he was left there for so long and nobody realised, and he was gone and forgotten. I spent my first year as a constable in an inner city suburb of Queensland. Now, of the population of this area, something like 40% was reserved for government commissioned housing for rehabilitated criminals and persons released from mental health centres. So here was a share of the creepy stuff, but to be fair, for the most part, the people we dealt with were more like cartoon characters. So there was this one guy. I met him probably just minutes before he decided to go on his rampage. One afternoon he decided to start destroying everything in his sight at the unit where he lived in. He was really going off on one, kicking through windows, throwing plant pots off the buildings at people going by. I don't know if he's trying to kill them or what. He was stealing people's shoes for some reason, smashing car windows. After about 15 minutes of mayhem, he must have run out of steam and gone back to his unit. That's where we found him, and he decided to bung a turn. He just would not stop screaming and bashing his head and face into any sharp object that he could find. Eventually we got a van with a pod and secured him. Then we went back into the house to try and figure out what the hell had happened. When we get back to the house, it's an absolute mess. Somehow he had fit 2 coal trolleys inside and was using them as furniture. The whole place smelled of rotten food and stuff. On his coffee table, if you could call it that, he had loads of weird scrawled out notes, as well as a wooden box. Inside the wooden box was about 100 small clipped seal bags. Over half of the bags had a brown organic material in them, the others had clear crystal stuff in them. He organised the bags from smallest to largest. Now with all the people in the area we had all sorts of wonderful ways that people were getting high. We were used to seeing weird stuff that people would ingest, so we wouldn't recognise these bags, but we got a pretty good idea that it's some kind of narcotic. So of course, we examined these bags and the contents. There is enough there to test if we need to, and I get one of the bags and empty it to see it better. Now there's lots of weird little freckles on these, and there's some weird little hairs on it. It's not unusual for a plant to have, but I've never seen it before. So I'm looking at it and holding it up, talking to my partner, saying that it might be a byproduct of some production of something else. Maybe it's a drug like cats, we're not sure. This might explain why the guy went nuts. A dog unit officer who assisted with the arrest comes in. He sees the scene, looks at the coffee table, looks at the bags and looks at me holding one. He tells me that guy got golden staph. He's been collecting scabs. The guy had been picking at golden staph infection on his leg, collecting them and organising them smallest to largest, ingesting them too. It's the most disturbing thing that I've probably found on all of my time serving. I'm working 3rd shift on Halloween night. I'm out by one of the smaller lakes just outside of the city limits. Kids love to go to these and drink. Now we're surrounded by some very nice houses. Going through the neighbourhood, each of the roads ends at a small 2-lane road that surrounds the lake. I'm slowing to the stop sign and already starting to look to my right to make the turn when my headlights started racing across the rock wall that surrounds the lake. I suddenly caught something out of the corner of my eye. As I look up at some of the trees dotting the surrounding of the walk path, I see that there's a guy hanging. At first I thought it was a Halloween decoration. The neighbourhood is really into decorating for the holidays. I stopped and got out, and as soon as my flashlight hits him, I realised nope, no decoration, he's actually dead. As I was standing there ready to radio it in, I noticed a gaggle of kids coming down the street trick-or-treating, and as soon as they see my car, they started heading there way faster, so I book it back up the block to meet their parents. As I meet one of the parents, I tell her that she has to take the long way round. I tell her that something's wrong, and she looks up. She can see on my face that I'm not kidding. Not mine, but my sibling is a police officer and shared this story with me, and I can't get it out of my head. It'll stick with me forever. He was responding to a domestic disturbance in a pretty bad area near Detroit. Apparently it's reported that there was lots of screaming and banging on the second floor for a full hour before everything went quiet. Being a rough neighbourhood, they didn't bother to call until things started to smell. So my brother and his partner walked up to the door, waited, got no response except for a faint meowing. Finding the door unlocked, they went inside. Things were tossed around the living room everywhere, the TV was busted as well as a few holes in the wall. It wasn't really a big deal though, they'd obviously been there from an argument. They still had to clear out the house though, and considering there were 2 voices reported in the kerfuffle, they'd seen 0 people so far. They then go try the bedroom, turn the handle, and instead of the door swinging open, my brother ends up walking into it with his shoulder and ramming against it because it's wedged shut. At this point, he knew he was about to walk into something bad and gave his partner that look and shoved the door. A multicolored cat then ran out with his fur white, except for around its face that was a bit pink. Directly on the other side of the door was where the female of the argument ended up laying, back against it, half seated. She was barely recognisable. Next to her there was a bedpost, torn off and obviously used to bludgeon her. They looked around the room where the blood prints were everywhere, looking like they originated from under the bed and then around the room. Among the amounts of blood prints on the wall eventually led to the window, the girl having desperately tried to claw it open. A few chunks of her nails laid on the floor. Turns out they had nailed the window shut because it was a bad neighbourhood. The handprint circled the room, as well as a few face prints where her head was smashed against the wall, leading up to her final resting place. The guy who did it was never found. When I asked my dad to tell me some of the worst experiences that he had in the police force, I never expected to hear the gnarliest story that I've ever heard. He was often the first police officer on the scene after a death was reported. Many of these cases were old people who had heart attacks or strokes, but every now and then he'd get called out to help deal with the locals who had fallen asleep in the bath or whatnot, and remained there submerged for days, sometimes weeks. He told us about the old man who had one of those heating elements that kept your bath warm. He slowly cooked there for 2 weeks before his daughter found him in what was essentially a human crock pot without the lid. That was bad. The other story's worse. He was called out with his colleagues to help deal with an old man who had come from the pub, had a stroke and died. He had laid down in front of their electrical fireplace unit. Now here's where it gets even worse. His wife, who by this point was very far gone with Alzheimer's disease, had brought him a huge collection of toast, crumpets, beans on toast, etc., and numerous cups of teas, and laid them around her husband over the course of 2 weeks. My dad said that this lady had no comprehension of anything that he said to her. She either referred to the old guy as her boyfriend, the strange guest, or the gas man, though they'd been married for 40 years. When my old man and his colleagues proceeded to remove the corpse, they said it took him ages as the meat was so tender that it slipped off the bone or whatever part they were trying to lift and would remain on the ground. The smell was unfathomable, and no human should ever look the way that the old man did. I never knew half of the stuff my dad experienced in the police, but I guess I'm happy that I don't know the rest of it. Not me, but my friend is a major Canadian metropolitan, and one night that we're supposed to go out after his shift, he decided to pick me up in his cop car, since he was almost finished with his shift and was just about to drop off the car back at the depot. On the way through, he got a call that somebody was complaining about noises coming from their basement and it sounded a lot like a person. He decided to make one last stop. I was told to wait in the car while he talked with the homeowner and checked it out. He was gone for about half an hour before he came back. He also had a look of pure terror on his face. Apparently, the homeowner was hearing loud thuds from his basement for a couple of weeks, but one day, on the day of the call, they were really loud and scaring him. So he had him walk into the basement, so he thought maybe somebody had broken in. My friend goes down to check it out. However, the basement is all dark and the lights need to be turned on from the electrical panel. So as they made their way to the panel and my friend says he saw something in the corner of his eye, he turns around and at the end of the hallway which leads to a cold storage area, he sees a guy's face around the door just standing there. He yells at the guy to turn and he doesn't. A homeowner sees him too and is really scared. My friend asks the guy to turn around once more before hitting the switches for the lights, and the guy/ghost at the exact same time disappear. My friend swore that he searched every inch of the basement and could not find anybody near. The homeowner is shook up and says that he's going to stay with a friend for the night and calls my friend to get another cop to survey the house while he's gone.